Roleplay Cafe, it's Dale here. I'm doing this video in part as maybe a little response and more so elaboration on why I'm listening to Runeslingers uh, Call of Cthulhu game with Ivan. Well, he's put up the first session, so I listened to that. And Anthony had asked me if the character sheets would be beneficial for me to see. And anybody who's ever played with me knows that character sheets are very secondary. Sometimes I forget to update them, or just they're there laying about. So they're not really, more so the focus of my attention. Now, I think in this case, I played Call of Cthulhu probably 30-something years ago, and there was a time, a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, Drew had run me through Mansions of Madness version of Call of Cthulhu, which I don't hardly remember any sanity rolls being rolled with that. I do realize that it's a percentile-based system. And I played it, like I said, twice. The 6th edition, as a witness in the actual play, doesn't seem like it's changed much in that regard. But why in particular this caught my attention, and why I think secondarily the character sheets may be of some importance or maybe some benefit to viewers, if that is indeed what Anthony wants to do, is incorporate them into the actual plays. Maybe a little bit can be discerned about that from the reasons why it came to my attention. Well, for a certain aspect of it, a larger part, an initial aspect, was because he mentioned how the in character immersion that it would generate from a basic role-playing system. Okay, I'm always interested in that. The second thing is whenever Jason and I sat down and played a one-on-one game of 2061 that spawned further creation in Dark Age of Man, it's because it was more of a back and forth situation, and it really, in my aspect, it encourages more so in character play or dialogue back and forth, which can possibly immerse you into that character a little bit more, as well as the GM being immersed in playing the NPCs, which is a heavy component in Dark Age Man. But I wanted to see how that would play out and what exactly Anthony meant, in the context of the basic role-playing game system with, or his adaptation of that with Call of Cthulhu. But anyway, so I watched that, and Anthony said it was good exposition, wasn't overly verbose, set the atmosphere, and gave pertinent information to Ivan. And midway, whenever Ivan fully engaged in the situation at hand that had manifested itself in the game, they both began the dialogue, and any descriptive narrative that was given by Anthony was appropriate to the way, in the direction that Ivan looked across the room, or he would just fill in the blank Anthony would fill in the blank as far as what was being witnessed. So I could tell, or at least from my vantage point, it did facilitate more of an in-character role-play experience. And I believe, I'm not the player in this in this section, but it seemed like that was what was transpiring on screen. And anyway, you have to forgive me. I'm driving. Anyway, that was to be witnessed. There was essentially, I think, to my recollection, only about 3 or 4 sanity rolls. And I think one time when there was a lot that needed to be picked, but I believe Ivan's competency level, it was given in the situation when he was taking his time. So no dice roll was to be had. Now, this is this brings up another point of why I wanted to investigate, because recently here, when Jason and Ivan and Anthony were doing video responses about this session, in particular in Ivan's afterthoughts of it, and Jason's response and Anthony's response. Jason, it got me thinking, because Anthony mentioned something about the sanity mechanic being basically a way to invoke a certain reaction. I guess that switch, as it was, like you call it when you roll the dice. And he mentioned other things like rolling dice was basically like if you roll to hit. So it the transference between the physical interaction and what you're trying to exhibit with the character, what the character is exhibiting. When you're trying to get the character to do, there's a tie-in there, so there's an in-sync component. And all these are my words and how I'm understanding this. So that was interesting to me. Now, the other night we played Simbaroom, and David remarked that because of all the rolls, it heightened his anxiety. And I can see that. When you don't know, whenever we're playing and there's a shockwave rippling through the ground and tossing people about, and we're in the middle of a situation where we're trying to keep from being stampeded by a horde of panicked citizens, as well as having to contend with some basically assassins trying to take us out, and who's going to fall, who's going to stand, and then we roll to find out. So that's that precipice of being on the edge of a cliff almost. You feel like, what's going to happen here? So you roll to find out. It's that little moment where you hold your breath and you say yes or no. So that can, as a player, excite you, or like David said, it incites the anxiousness. Now this works in opposition to the first conceptualization of like I've always said, as Jason mentioned, I like my mechanics being under the hood. As it were, driving a car, you don't want to stop and work on the engine. You want it to run and be intuitive enough to where somebody can pick up a play, and then you can get to really engage in character role play, which is what my main focus is. Now, these mechanics, I would see, my only requirement was that they were intuitive, that they made sense, they had more of a universality to them, to where it wasn't so fiddly that you had to flip through so many pages that would take so much book looking or sheet looking that it would drag you out of immersion. And I believe we successfully did that with Darkest Command. Now, as far as utilization of the mechanic to prompt anxiety or draw tension out of the player that corresponds with the tension that's being felt by the character. So it bridges that. hadn't much considered that. So that's one reason I'm looking at this, because the sanity mechanic is the component that was supposed to make that switch come alive. Now, I can say that a sanity component in Symbaroum, like you have the corruption. When David managed or happened to see the worm, he got 3 corruption. This is something that he witnessed. It's almost like, in effect, this almost has the same conceptually or understandably, a sanity aspect to it. Yet corruption itself, I've used it to corrupt the body, to degrade the body of the character. So these mechanics, sometimes I wonder, that have to be called upon more so by the GM, are recognized when they're triggered by the GM to bring about, is, I believe some GMs, if you know the system, you have to realize it, you have to be aware of it. They seem almost to where it's not actively awareness, but passively, and then you have to bring them to awareness. Now we have to roll corruption, and now we have to roll sanity. There are key moments to when it would warrant rolling sanity, and it could be easily recognizable. I know in certain aspects, like in Dark Age of Man, we've got things that aren't, in Dark Age of Man, you can play a broad array of different character types, and not only just martially competent characters, but as in Jason played the merchant, and the way he moves and interacts with the world is through trade or getting something done on that end. So, in your purse rating is how effectual he can be in situations like that. Whenever he's trying to broker deals or trying to mediate or move anything in any direction on a larger scale. And I ain't talking about like buying a pickaxe. That goes more to the just his level. If he's a 2, yeah, he's got the money to do that. But if he wants to broker some deal, but a larger deal, that's when put your money where your mouth is. That's when it comes to bear. So if you're playing a merchant, as Jason was, that's when it's more so utilized in game that you roll. You see if you can't affect the world in that way. Now, it's akin to it. In that way is something that the GM has to be more so mindful for, because it's atypical. It's not traditional, as far as attribute wise that we all associate with the body. How quick is he? How agile? How strong? What's his conditioning? His or her. There are components, mechanically speaking, that are more so focused on the physicality of the world and the character and how he interacts with it. And that's what we're all used to. So things that outside of that realm become a little bit more unwieldy or less understandable amongst the large player base. So you have to be mindful to bring it back up. And I would suggest like corruption or sanity. There was moments in Symbaroum where I didn't bring up corruption. It's that added piece that you have to remember that affects the character in some way. So you bring it up and see if it has any degrading effects. Same way with sanity, and I bring up the purse rating in Dark Age of Man. It's just something along the lines of not being common, that it has to be, you have to be mindful of it, and in large regard, especially sanity and corruption, there's something that the GM would cue you for more so. I think in situations where the player might know when he needs to roll something to see if he's getting away. It's preemptively spoken in the dialogue between the GM, the player, and the player's probably already picking up the dice to roll that because he knows what's coming down the pipe. Not so much the others. Something you have to get used to. So those mechanics, and those mechanics more so, I think, may hinge a little bit more so dangerously, or be more effectual in the long term for the player, whether he gains insanity or he gains corruption, which is going to be a slow burn effect on him that has probably a cumulative effect, that affects his whole ability to deal with whatever obstacles he's going to face, in those situations. So that's one component of it that has to be, the GM has to be mindful of. And that's what this one of the main reasons I'm compelled to, or a couple of main reasons I'm compelled to watch this and watch it play out. Anthony said that there was in the second session, which is yet to be put up, there are 2 players, and in the third session they brought in a third player. So I want to see how that transpires as far as the interaction with the players and the GM across the board, through these sessions as it builds up. Is it a little bit more fluid? Is IC a little bit more immersive, since there seems to be less rolls? And I say the first session, there was 3 or 4 sanity rolls, and I didn't check. I didn't see, other than maybe a lockpick that I think was a given for the situation that didn't have to be rolled. But I think in general, I've seen and I can understand how certain mechanics. I'm still of the position that mechanics need to be more so intuitive, universal, from my personal taste. But I can see, and it's interesting to me to see that some can bridge the player to the character and cross over and have a parallel effect. You don't know. You're having a little bit of real time anxiety as the character is in game too. So it bridges there. But I'd like to see some of that play out. I don't know necessarily if it would do with the sanity. Like I said, maybe that's just a burn and anxiety to see what happens. And maybe it informs how you should react and play. I don't know if there are stipulations of, like, you've got insanity now you are affected by trembles, or now that you have to role play out as far as your characters. In Dark Age of Man, we play, and if it happens effectually, you play in character. You just need to play your character genuinely and just represent them in ways that make sense for the situation, and how, and the character in particular, how he would be affected. And it goes like that. So there's still, in any game session, in any game you play, you can adapt your character, or you can transform your character. It evolves by his or her experiences they go through. So that's one way of approaching it. Prompting with sanity markers and the depth of insanity that can be incurred, and then even cues to how it affects your character. Whenever we play in Alien the other night, there was a time when I rolled and it's fell rolled. In any of the free league games, you're going to have some, like, versions of mutations, and this stress in Alien, John didn't roll randomly for it. The GM didn't roll randomly for it. He stated that what would make sense in this situation, he selected it. So that's what I got. It was the trembles, the shakes from dealing with a situation where I was paranoid about someone sabotaging the crew and the rations in particular. So, in which I just picked up and incorporated into my character in play. So he didn't do that randomly. There was times whenever Jason ran us through those dark places, it had a similar effect where one of the characters, I can't remember if it was Jorian or David, that they encouraged some kind of random situation that we justified and it made sense inside the context of the crisis that was going on the ship at the time. You know, when they were looking at the monitor, I believe it was the tail end, where there's some heightened anxiety that the player had to represent in the character. So whether or not you're using cues or using, from a direct list of this is how a character should act, or this is what he's affected with, then you incorporate it. You can play that way. You can play totally from an agency standpoint of like, this is how my character would react. And then you can incorporate that into your character. Of your own volition. Play that way. So it's going to be interesting to me. That's what primarily I'm looking at, to go a long way around this. The character sheet, it may be useful to, I think, for just in general, for people to draw, not only see what each character has laid out in front of them and what they may select. I don't know if the character sheet has, it's been a while, things that you can draw from, or a list of gear, or a list of your abilities or skills, or what you may have that you can draw to bear, bring to bear on the situation. But really, when I'm watching the game, I'm just watching Ivan react in real time to the situation that Anthony presents in front of him. And that's the way it plays out. So anyway, that's just some of my thoughts on it and why I'm following. Primarily, I think character sheet can be good. It's not a make or break for me. It might be a passing interest. I think it may be maybe something that others could draw parallels or tessellate with what is going on across the whole. But anyway, I'll let you go right now. I got some errands to run now, and I'll see you later. All right, take care, everybody.